This is the Saturday devotion for, I have to get it ahead of time because I've got several things that have to be done on Saturday, so it's really Friday, but we're going to do the Saturday devotion. The Apostles. 12 original, Judas replaced, and some have said that Paul should be counted as an apostle, somebody that was personally called by Jesus while he was here on earth. Nevertheless, we have the list of the apostles in 4 places. Matthew 10, Mark 3, Luke 6, and Acts 1. And today we want to take a look at one that has a great deal of impact on our lives, but isn't really mentioned much, not even like Philip. His name is Matthew. His other name is Levi. Levi was his Jewish name, and Matthew was his name that is most often seen in the scriptures. He only appears 8 times. Remember, 4 of those times it's just in the listing of the apostles. But he wrote an entire gospel. He wrote the entire Gospel of Matthew, which records the entire life of Jesus. What was his life like before Christ? Well, he was a tax gatherer. What does that mean? He worked for the Roman government. He had a tax office someplace just outside of Capernaum, where he would tax the trade routes going and coming from Capernaum. Now, tradition says that most of the tax collectors were corrupt. They paid a fee to the Romans to collect the taxes and then took out a livelihood for themselves. Therefore, since there was nobody to really monitor how much they took out for themselves, they say that most of the tax collectors got rich. Got rich on the people. Not too much like today, is it? He wrote the book Gospel of Matthew approximately 25 years after Christ's death, someplace in that neighborhood. And we know that he accurately accounted for Christ's life. What was his calling like? Well, his calling was found in Matthew 9:9 and Mark 2:14 and in Luke 5:28. He was sitting in his tax office, and Jesus said, "Come and follow me." And it says he did. But there's something interesting about his calling, which also deals with his commitment. You see, in Luke chapter 5, verse 28, it records that he left everything behind. You say, well, they all left everything behind to follow Jesus. No, not really. Fishermen could go back to fishing. But a tax collector, especially one that followed Jesus, would have severed all ties, burnt all of the bridges behind him. The Jews didn't like him because he collected taxes, so his reputation with the Jews would be bad. And even after he followed Jesus, it would be bad with all of the scribes and the Pharisees and the leaders in the Jewish community because Christ challenged them. He left the Romans because the Romans saw Jesus as an enemy, as somebody that was in conflict with their government. So he had nothing to go back to. He couldn't go back to tax collecting. He couldn't go back to the Jewish community. He really did leave everything. His commitment was complete. In Luke 5:29, it talks about the commitment that he had, that he gathered together everybody he knew, invited them to his house, and invited Jesus. Today we would call it an evangelistic coffee. We're doing a similar program at Temple Baptist with the My Hope Billy Graham program, where we're inviting people to people's homes, some for meals and some just for snacks, but we're going to play the Billy Graham film so that they might be saved. And I'm sure that Matthew's intention was to get together all of his friends so that they might get saved, that they might find Jesus as the Messiah. The last time we see Matthew, we find him in Acts 1:13 in the upper room. Jesus had been crucified, he'd been resurrected, And now they're waiting. They're waiting for Pentecost. And we find him up with all of the others, praying and waiting. Everything else we know about Matthew is tradition. Not scriptural, but just what tradition says. Most traditions say that Matthew went on to be an evangelist, to move around from country to country and to share the gospel. What were his credentials and why did Jesus call him? Well, I believe Jesus calls everyone for a purpose. But one of the things that I think most of them have in common is that they have a heart for God. They have compassionate hearts, tender hearts. But he undoubtedly saw his talent as well. He had administrative skills. He'd have to be a tax collector. He had writing accuracy he had to have for tax collecting. He had a very strong Jewish mindset. The name Levi tells us that he was steeped in Jewish tradition. And therefore, when he wrote the gospel, inspired by the Holy Spirit, nevertheless, undoubtedly it was slanted towards the Jewish mindset and was clearly showing the fulfillment of prophecies that a Jew would recognize. Why did Jesus choose him? He chose him because he saw his heart. That's what he does with everybody that he chooses. But he also saw that he could use his skills. And he did that because Matthew is an incredibly good gospel, one where we learn so much about Jesus and how many prophecies he fulfilled. That's your thought for the day. Hope that you're going to be in church tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday. Don't hang out, but come on to church. God bless you and have a good day.